Good afternoon, everybody, and we are back again with another Turning Tuesday this week where we are going to be covering how to go into your Passes tab, what is the purpose of the Passes tab, and how to maximize your efforts inside of Fusion with that Passes tab. Now, we're not going to dive very deep into it as we walk through stuff today. However, this is a general overview. And starting not next week, but in the new year, we are going to be walking through each toolpath start to finish versus the individual tabs. Now, some of you out there are probably questioning my facial hair choices. I want you to know that I am not Fusion Phil. I am another one of his brothers. This week, we're going with Gil. However, he had to go to the hospital because he split his lip open pretty good and needed to get a tetanus shot. So let's kick this off. Again, if you guys are new here, we appreciate you fully. I am Gil over here at JitCAD Cam. We are an Autodesk reseller, and we're going to get right into this content. So as you guys are going to see, we've already done content around the idea of our setups, and we've also walked through multiple of our toolpaths. So I'm going to start by jumping over to my turning tab. Now, if you guys are looking to follow along with these part files that we use for examples, they can be found inside of the Home tab down in the CAM sample area at the bottom of your data panel. Now, let's go ahead and start with one of my favorite toolpaths to always show an example with, which is the turning face toolpath. Now, again, we've already talked about our tooling. We've talked about what we like to refer to as the wear in Z-axis on the lathe. Then we've also talked about the wear in the X-axis. Now, lastly, what we're going to do is we're going to jump over to our Passes tab. Now, from the go, as you guys may or may not know, this might be your first video, we like to start with two different rules. Rule number one, left to right on your tabs, and then work down the list before you go to the next tab. Rule number two is when in doubt, just hit OK, because it's very hard to troubleshoot a toolpath until you get a toolpath on your part. As you guys can see, we've now got some color coding to the system. This also will help you with troubleshooting your toolpaths. For example, we have blue, and then we basically have everything else that's not blue. Now, that's the way my brain thinks about it, and the reason why my brain thinks about it that way is because when we look at our tabs inside of Fusion, you guys will see we have our Passes tab, which shows blue lines, and then we have our linking tab that shows everything else. Now, next week, we are going to dive into the linking tab, but for today, our main focus is nothing more than our blue lines. So as you can see, the very first section we get is cycle and direction. This is where we're going to control, do we feed, in this case, outside to inside, or do we want to go inside to outside? Again, very simple to change the direction of the blue lines. Now, the reason why I can get away with this is because, again, we've constrained them in X and Z, and now we're just dealing with either the number of blue lines or how the blue lines are going to remove my material. So we go down a little bit further, as you guys are going to see, passes. We do have things like the multiple passes. In this case, let's say I wanted to make a couple of stepovers. Now, this is going to be determined by how much material you have between your model front and your stock from your setup. But as you guys can see, I went ahead and typed in a 0.02 step over, and automatically we've now added additional blue lines to our part. Again, if I go to geometry, for example, we are working to the model front, and Fusion has already decided that you probably want to start where your stock is. So let's go ahead and shift things up here, because we're going to go ahead and pivot and work. So I do see a question. I'm going to pause here real quick. So one of the reasons why you may want to go inside to outside, as the question is in chat, is in the event that you actually were working inside to outside. However, let me go ahead and show you guys this example. This is a normal turning tool. Now, if I was going to face off this part and save some cycle time, maybe instead I face it off with what would be referred to as a boring bar. So again, let me go ahead and go to my Fusion library. We got an ID boring tool. And just like that, in this case, if I was to simulate this, you would notice that we have that ability again to work from the inside profile outwards. Again, chip loading and feeding into your tool based on your tool angle, your insert angle. But as such, again, inside to outside can be very handy based on the order of operations. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. As you guys can see, it's very easy to toggle the difference. When we talk about this part in much more detail, as well as doing full-blown toolpaths, you'll see there's going to be a point where we don't even use the facing toolpath. But let's go ahead and pivot. So again, we're going to go ahead and now jump into a turning profile rough. Now, in this case, I do want to go back to my OD roughing tool. And of course, I'm going to hit OK just so that we can get a toolpath on the part. And then from there, one additional move I am going to make temporarily is down in my toolbar, I'm going to turn off the linking part of the toolpath. As you guys can see, let me know if you can see this quite well out there in chat. My blue lines on my part are the passes. This is 100% what we are trying to control. So again, I'm going to go ahead and edit this toolpath. Now you can double left click the icon. You can right click, edit the toolpath, and then we're going to jump to our passes tab. So again, you guys might change the X and Z location. Remember, work through these tabs efficiently. We're just looking at the passes tab from a high level. So as you guys can see, there's quite a few options in here. Again, we have things like horizontal or vertical or back cutting, pulling backwards on that tool. We can also control whether or not we're going to go front, back, or both ways with that tool. Again, depending on your tool, we'll grab a couple of different tools here. That's what's going to allow us to, again, change how our blue lines are going to work on this tool or on this part. Again, we have things like grooving, multiple regions, undercuts. There's so many different things dependent on your tool and what you have to be able to adjust to make that happen. So again, as you guys are seeing, these are all options that are strictly controlling the direction of the blue lines and the direction at which you're feeding. And a good example of this, let's say we go vertical passes. You're going to see now we're vertically coming into our part. Now, for those of you that don't know, I'm going to show this as an example, but I do not recommend this. If you didn't want to plunge in this area, one thing a lot of people do, this is an old habit, is you turn off grooving and you go ahead and hit OK. And now magically you're not grooving in this area. If you've caught my video last week, actually 2 weeks ago, the correct way to fix this, which is why I always go back to rule number 1, is we should have fixed it when defining our geometry. I should have said groove suppression, don't go in this groove. And as you guys are going to see, we'll no longer be going inside that groove. So just keep that in mind. Even though you do have things like groove suppression, there's times where defining your geometry the proper way overrides the idea of the cycles and the direction. Now, moving down a little bit further, this is the pass themselves. So again, we've gotten our blue lines in the correct orientation to what we want to do. And now what we can do is we can go through and define our maximum depth of cut. So this is nothing more than your step down or your step over. Now this is a maximum depth of cut. So let's say I want to do less blue lines by increasing my depth of cut. As you're going to see now, we have fewer blue lines. They are still retained in that rectangle of X and Z, as well, the direction to which we want them. So again, maybe we're going to go horizontal passes, and then I'm going to say both ways. Again, you're not going to see much of a change here, but if I was to turn on my linking moves, you'll notice we have a lot less linking, and that's because we're going to feed in, feed up, out, all the way up, back in, down, and back drag our tool. Again, these are all tricks to start to lower your cycle time. Again, I cannot stress this enough because I get so many questions about it, is this is all possible because we've defined the where, we're just now defining the how. A few other things that you can get away with, we could skip wall passes. Another common one that I like to do is the use pecking. You guys have never used pecking before. What you could do is turn on points now, and you'll notice, I don't know if you guys can see this, but there's a bunch of black dots now in my toolpath, which means we feed in, we retract. Working in terrible materials like plastic. Again, pecking will cause things to chip break naturally based on our tool path. Now, one warning to this whole concept, guys. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, but as you guys are seeing is I am just controlling how the blue lines are removing material, right? So again, we go down a little bit further. As you guys are seeing, we have things like our X and Z. We have the ability to extend our stock as well, depending on what you need to do. This, again, lots of different things to adjust and to define. Now from this, let's go ahead and shift gears back over to a finishing toolpath. So again, we're going to go into turning profile finish. We have our toolpath, so we're going to go ahead and hit OK. As you guys can see, I get some of my common errors. These are lead outs being modified. Now, again, that's a linking problem that we'll talk about next week. But again, you're going to notice we have cycle and direction. We have passes. Lastly, we have stock to leave. Now, things have changed a little bit going from roughing to finishing, because you're going to notice, although we can do multiple step overs, we can't necessarily define other things like I can't talk today, guys. We cannot change and define things like being able to do our max optimal loads, our roughing cycles, chip breaking, as you're seeing. But because this is a finish pass, we now have the ability to go in and do some things like turn on cutter comp so that you can adjust it at the controller. Now I'm going to pause here because I always get these questions. Usually on a lathe tool, for most of you, you do not need to adjust cutter comp. You're just going to leave this as in computer, because when you touched off your tool in X and Z, you're possibly going to compensate it there mildly. Now, I say that as a small rule of thumb. Now, if you're running heavy production, you may want to do something like utilizing wear, which would allow for you to compensate the wear out of a tool over its lifetime. So again, we're going to go down. As you guys will see, again, you have things like spring passes. And then one of my favorite options here is no dragging. So if you're questioning what a spring pass is basically a repeat of the final pass. Again, in case your part is bending or springing away from the tool. Now, I am also getting a lot of additional moves now with the ability to go in and change some additional features. So as you're going to see now, if I simulate this, we have quite a bit of different things happening. So again, we're going to go in, and because we're doing no dragging, we're never going to drag this tool based on the cutter direction. So as you can see there, I came up, down, and came down that vertical wall so that I could feed in, again, getting to a point where we're going to transition out and again, feed back towards center. So I'm never back dragging on this part of my insert. I'm also not back dragging necessarily in the X direction or the Z direction on the back side of the insert. So again, very important when you guys are trying to get some good surface finishes. That back dragging can cause some problems if you're trying to take too much material at once, because you're engaging a large amount of the surface of the cutter. So I see a question out there about inverse wear. Inverse wear at the end of the day, guys, is actually the opposite of normal wear. So it's just adjustment is entered as a positive number versus a negative number, or vice versa. So again, depending on your part file, you could have certain areas you need to make smaller and other areas that you need to make bigger. Good example of that, heat shrink, not heat shrink, I should say, is heat fitting, bearing races, pressed on type of profiles. In the same kind of tool path, you could break it up. You would have two tool paths, one using inverse wear and one using normal wear. So again, this works really, really good on those guys that go and do a minus tolerance on your drawing. So let's go ahead and keep going with this. So we're going to go ahead and pivot down a little bit further. We're going to look at turning groove. Again, jumping over, we're going to grab a turning groove tool. So I should have one in here, and it doesn't look like I do. So let's go out to my library. Again, your Fusion library isn't on by default, guys. I would highly recommend you right click, turn all libraries on so that you can grab tooling that you're seeing here. So again, we're going to go OD grooving. And with that, we're going to go ahead and again, hit our OK button to let it naturally do what it needs to do. However, this is overkill had we done this part correct out the box. But what I want you guys to pay attention to again is we are just going to look at the blue lines. The blue lines are the most important part of this toolpath. So again, I can go to my passes tab. Now, what you're seeing from the start is we're getting what's called an up and down direction. What does that mean? If I simulate this toolpath, we're going to see that, is it going up and down with the roughing cycle? No, it's feeding in, feeding out, and then moving over. Where we're going to really see this problem start to happen is what's going to happen when we get down to the point of making one of our finish passes. If I can click the point. Give me one sec here, guys. We're actually going to have to go to this point. But when we're trying to make a cleanup pass with that grooving tool, notice how we are feeding all the way through and going up in the X, positive in the X. We are dragging this tool across our part. Not the most necessarily worst thing possible, but as you're seeing here, I'm now getting a collision because there's so much material left to be finished. So we can adjust that. Again, the blue lines, how the blue lines are going to remove the material on the part. So as you guys can see, we're going to go to our passes tab. Off the rip, we have the ability to control and say only down. Now I am going to shorten this all back up, guys. Give me a sec here while we go ahead and change my front, do a selection for my back. And of course, let's kick on some rest machining. And as you guys have seen, because of rest machining, I get an angular grooving toolpath because that tool path, when we did our roughing, never accommodated for the fact that we wanted groove suppression. So let's go back in and let's simulate this one more time to take a look at it. Again, we'll give my computer a second to catch up. I'm going to get my stock out of the way for this. But this is our last path. As you can see, we've gone down, over, and then we're retracting, moving back the other way, and feeding down into our part as much as we can. So again, we're no longer trying to pull back on that tool. How I adjusted that was nothing more than making the change from up and down to only down. Again, you guys have a lot of additional offsets here. You could use wear, again, commonly not so much using wear because the way you touch off your tools on the lathe, you can adjust in an X and Z direction. So a few other things, the amount of step over for your finish pass, how many finish passes. You're going to notice we don't have spring pass here. However, you do still have repeat finish pass, which accommodates and does the same thing. Moving down a little bit further, you guys are going to notice we have roughing passes. This is one of those times where we're encountering this toolpath is both finishing and roughing simultaneously when it calculates. So we can again go in and adjust that as well. So as you're going to see here, I'm going to go ahead and say sideways with partial. And what that's going to do is now it's going to do a more left and right lateral motion. Again, you think back to when we did our OD roughing, we have the ability to do horizontal or vertical. Well, you still have that same kind of concept here with your grooving tool. Now for this, would not recommend using a square tipped kind of tool. This is where we would see something more like a lollipop style cutter. And a lollipop or a circle or a disc cutter is designed to be bidirectional. It's designed to go in kind of all ways and constantly maintain the same kind of cut. So again, I'm going to simulate this here, get this drug in. You'll notice we come into our cut, we zigzag across, we retract out. But once again, if I wanted to optimize this and drop my cycle time, this tool is meant to go both directions. So again, I play the game of is it where the blue lines are or how the blue lines are finishing out my part. In this case, it's the how. We go back to my blue line tab. Again, we can go down. We can go ahead and adjust this. We could set our grooving pattern. We should be able to set both ways. This is where I usually get myself in trouble. So let's see here. Now, this is why, again, you're going to notice that we have the ability to adjust things outside of this. Now, I can't go both ways with this toolpath. However, some of the newer toolpaths that you have, for example, turning groove roughing, we're going to go into our passes tab, and you guys are going to notice, again, we have center, sides. We have a lot more control when we split up our finishing from our roughing. So again, we can go width first, we can go depth first, front to back to front. Again, fully capable of adjusting even more outside of this toolpath. But it's still the same concept at the end of the day. Use your OK button. Let's get a toolpath on that part. In this case, I'm going to show you guys some Hollywood magic. We're going to go back to what we had before. And I'm going to go turn and groove rough. However, I'm going to turn off rest machining so that the toolpaths don't get confused. And then I can make those adjustments from there. When making adjustments, don't spend a ton of time at the end of the day trying to go through and adjust everything at once. Take the simple approach and slowly make changes. So for example, right now I have a side entry, which means my toolpath is going to start on the right side and work towards the left. So again, I'm going to bring this in. As you guys are going to see, there's my groove. We step over a little bit, we groove again. Now, depending on chip evacuation, deflection, there's so many reasons why you may want to go in the center first. So again, very simply, you guys are seeing by changing my options, as you're going to notice that green is now my entry position. But by changing out those options, I've decreased the amount of things to select as well. Going a little bit further with that, again, we're now back to our passes. We can make semi-finished passes to remove cusps. No semi-finished passes. So many different options when we talk about the blue lines on our part. So again, depth or width. So giving you guys another example here, all over the place with a lot more fun and a lot more things as you guys are seeing. So let's go ahead and look at a few more toolpaths. So again, I'm going to go ahead and shift gears. You do have what's called adaptive roughing. It is very much like adaptive milling. Again, it's not going to use a linear toolpath, as in linear straight in X or straight in Z. This is going to go back and forth and try to optimize everything possible. So again, as you guys are going to see, we have optimal load here. Let's say I could take 100th thou byte with that tool. Got to change that to a little less because that is bigger than my groove radius. But again, you're going to get a more swooping action back and forth to maximize what that tool is capable of doing, as well as getting good chip evacuation the entire time through. Another one, turning single groove, guys, very straightforward. You're going to notice your menus are reduced by a lot because all we're doing on a toolpath like this is defining a location to go to, and it's nothing more than one in, one out. Getting a little further down, talking about our turning threads. Now, a big change that has happened when we talk about threads is the control of the thread pitch and everything has been moved to geometry, but our passes tab is still the same. Once you get the blue lines, how do you want those blue lines to interact with your part? How do you want to remove the material? What is my depth of cut going to look like? So again, we look at a few more. Chamfer toolpath, again, you're just busting the edges on the part. But again, a very simplified passes menu, as in, do you want to add extensions or do you want to reverse it, make multiple step downs as you cut those chamfered edges off? Again, this is all stuff that I would do at the model level to make your life much easier. So again, let's get back in here because we're going to talk about turning part. Lastly, turning part, once again, it's a pretty simple toolpath. The roughing tends to be the worst in grooving and adaptive roughing, normal profile roughing, and groove roughing. You'll notice the most options. Again, we're just back here to nothing more than, do you want to peck when you want to part it off? Do you want to reduce the feeds and speeds? Again, these are all valuable things that all we're doing is, once we got the blue line where we want it, is adjusting how the blue line is going to interact with the part. So guys, I'm going to leave that to you. As I can see, we've had a ton of viewers in here checking out this content. This is where I'm going to tell you guys at the end of the day is, of course, if you like this content, you want to see more of it, feel free to like, subscribe, turn on your notifications, leave comments down below. But if you're having problems and need one-on-one help as well, feel free to shoot us an email utilizing the emails down below. And with that, it's not what you know, it's who you know. You all know me. I want to say it. I do want to say it. You all know me, Gil, Fusion Phil's brother, over here at Jit CAD Cam, and I'm here to help in any way I can until he gets back here with his beautiful black beard. In the meantime, we look forward to seeing you guys on Friday, as well as next week, Monday and Tuesday, for again, Milling Monday, Turning Tuesday, and we are kicking off Free Support Friday, where you can bring questions. You could actually have us roast your part, apparently seems to be the theme from some time to time. But we're here for you guys. Have a great rest of your day. Again, look forward to seeing you guys on Friday.